A historic verdict was given just before the day ended. Trump has been convicted, but let's take a look at what all happened before the verdict was actually announced. Judge Yuan Merchan had already summoned Donald Trump, his legal team and prosecutors into the courtroom where the former president has been on trial since mid-April. The judge said he planned to send the jury home in a few minutes at around 4:30 p.m. with deliberations to resume the next morning. Trump looked upbeat. He was having animated chats with his lawyers, but then unexpectedly the judge was back on the bench. There was another note from the jury, signed at 4:20 p.m. Merchan read it out aloud. "We, the jury, have reached a verdict," it said, and asked for an extra 30 minutes to fill out the verdict form. As the minutes ticked by, defense lawyer Todd Blanche whispered to Trump, who was stone-faced, arms crossed across his chest. Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg, whose office brought the case, entered the courtroom and sat with aides in the gallery. The courtroom was packed with people, among them dozens of reporters, sketch artists, members of the public, and Trump's son, Eric. Just before 5 p.m., the judge returned to the bench yet again. He reread the portentous note and instructed court officers to bring the jury into the courtroom. The 12 jurors entered the courtroom. Most looked straight ahead as they walked past Trump. Then the moment came. The courtroom was silent. Judge started asking each juror, how say you to the first count of the indictment? Each juror, one by one, declared guilty. After the last charge was read aloud, Trump was seen sitting with an expressionless stare. Trump began slowly looking around the room and glanced, still expressionless, at jurors as they affirmed they found him guilty on all counts. Blanche rested his face in his hands and furrowed his brow. Merchan thanked the jury for its work, something common at the end of any trial. And of course, we know what happened after Trump walked out of the courtroom. We have been playing that bite for you. For more on this verdict, we were earlier joined by Professor Mark Merowitz, who teaches at State University of New York Maritime College. He's also a lawyer. Here's what he had to say on the legal proceedings.
Interesting fact of history, in the 1920 presidential election, Eugene V. Debs, who was the Democratic Socialist candidate for president, actually ran for president while in prison and got 1 million votes. He actually went to prison for urging American young men not to fight in World War I. Nothing to do with this kind of a case. But I don't think we're going to get to that point. Let's just talk about the case itself. First of all, the 34 counts that you spoke about, that is built on a fairly tenuous foundation. Why? Because it's 34 counts of falsifying business records, which have been elevated. These are misdemeanors. These are not felonies, higher crimes. But to make it a higher crime, the New York District Attorney has elevated it by connecting that misdemeanor, a lower level crime, to the felony of tax violation, election fraud. Now, the problem is, if you take the time, which I have, to read the indictment, they really don't explain in there what the second crime is. What is the higher crime which elevates this to a serious criminal felony? And the jury didn't specify this either. By the way, about the jury, you mentioned that it took them about 2 days to decide. But that's interesting because the judge's instructions in our system, the jury is the trier of the fact. The judge instructs the jury on the law. The judge's instructions in this case was 55 pages long, and the jury was not given those 55 pages. Indeed, the jury sent the question to the judge and said, I need you to read back some of this. It's so complicated. So I find that quite amazing and perplexing that they were able to reach a verdict on this incredibly complicated case, which many legal experts still cannot figure out what was Trump specifically accused of. Tax fraud, election fraud. So there is, and even your overview indicates the high, incredible complexity and many issues in this case. That's why I think the appeal will probably be successful either to the New York Court of Appeal, the New York State courts, or maybe even to the Supreme Court.